I'm going to record this. So good morning, everybody. And this is Jason Lee, who's going to be my guest this morning. And Jason, here's his contact information. Don't worry about it if you don't get it all down now, because I will post it one more time towards the end. And I'm going to have to ask you a question, Jason, and that is something I don't know. And that is, where did you ever come up with the name? I never asked you this. I've known you for years. How did you get Maker valuation? Maker. I mean, what an interesting sort of name.
Yeah, there's a bit of a story behind that, I guess, for sure. But when I decided to form the company and I was thinking about what I should name it, it's a little bit personal as well.
Okay, if you don't want to get in, don't have to. I'm not putting you in the spot.
No, I don't mind sharing like a quick synopsis, quick overview. It just basically stands for like in my personal walk, personal journey. Like everyone else, I'm sure everyone has their own personal story, but I just found that, in my journey of life here so far, I've had a lot of help with people that I've, like, for example, Barry, yourself, Lois, as well, getting into appraisal in general. I just found like a lot of the connections I've made and people I've met, it's sort of, sometimes the timing was a little bit interesting to me. And I just, I'm also consider myself a man of faith. And
that I know.
Yeah, and I just kind of tied it all together. And I just wanted to have my company have something that kind of represents my faith a little bit, but also I think it has kind of a dual meaning. Like Maker also means kind of like getting things done, in my opinion, just keeping the ball rolling and, just making sure that I'm on top of things in the appraisal game. So it's kind of has a dual meaning, and that's sort of the idea behind the Maker name.
You know what? This is interesting because we get into stuff about, a person's a doctor, a lawyer, or whatever they do, and they don't ever talk about, we're starting off a conversation with your spiritual side. And people don't get into this about somebody. I think that's quite, I've known you for a long time, and I do know you have a spiritual side, and you consider yourself a very, religious, you've got a good set of ethics and everything else. Let's go back a little bit. You are an AACI. Do you want to explain to people very quickly what an AACI stands for?
Yeah, absolutely. So in Canada, there's I guess a nonprofit governing body called the Appraisal Institute of Canada that sort of regulates and directs the affairs of appraisers in Canada, licensed appraisers. And the AACI designation is it's the actual technical name for it is accredited appraiser through the Canadian Institute. And it's the designation that they award you with when you've completed all the experience and educational requirements to essentially become a licensed appraiser in Canada. The AACI designation, the distinction that you get though with that one is it allows you to actually appraise any type of real property in Canada. So it's not just it's the least restrictive. It allows you to focus on any type of property type that you wish, that you want to specialize in, or that you want to focus on, essentially. Yeah.
Well, you're a university trained. I mean, you went to high school, and then you went here, and then you went to Toronto. Then
yes,
you went to university. And what made you want to get into appraisal? I mean, you came to me. You were young.
Yep.
I was on my way out of the appraisal business. I had enough. 30 years was enough for me. And you were coming in. You did a little training with me, not much. We didn't spend a lot of time together. You worked more under Lois Hicks, who took over the business and still continues it. And you decided to get your AACI. Just so people know, it's not an easy thing to get by any means, is it? It's pretty tough.
Yeah. So I mean, one of the pre-requirements is to complete at least a minimum of your undergraduate degree from university, typically a business degree. So I have a background in finance, business finance, and I completed my degree in business finance. And then during my time in my undergrad, there was a internship, a co-op kind of a, I guess, workshop at my school, and they, one of the bigger valuation firms visited to, try to entice students into their co-op, I guess, program and everything. And it was a company. It was
Probably Altus at the time.
yeah, it was Altus. That's right. It was Altus. It was a big Altus, yeah, publicly traded. But anyway, they're the first ones to sort of introduce me to the world of valuations in real estate and appraisal. And I just thought that the combination of like working with numbers, working with valuations, but also sort of being in real estate, that just really appealed to me, because I guess the path I was on originally in school would have kind of put me into like the financial industry, maybe on the trading floor or something of that nature. And I just kept picturing my future, and I just thought that yeah, like I've always wanted to sort of picture my future as having a family, having a fairly good work-life balance and stuff. And I just thought in that industry, at least starting out from everyone I was talking to, is first 5 years you can't really build that. So that was sort of a big kind of red flag for me. I was trying to think, what else could I do? And then yeah, appraisal was sort of that. It seemed to, at least when I projected forward, it seemed to be something that maybe would allow me to have a bit more work-life balance. And now in hindsight, it's really demanding, working morning till night. But these days, with the changes and being able to work from home and stuff, it sort of, I guess, still gives me somewhat of a balance. I still get to see my family, my kids and stuff. So it's good. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. This is the last thing, and we're just two little issues before we get into the real core here today. And that is, when you start from scratch, it takes you how many years to become an AACI? Roughly, very rough, not fast track, just normalized.
Normal. The average, I would say once you start the program towards becoming an AACI, I would say probably normal is around 4 years. That's like, I mean, it's anywhere from 4 to 10 years, to be honest. But I mean, I don't talk to too many people that take 10 years. I think fast would be anywhere in the 2 to 3 year range. And this is like already assuming you already have like some of the prerequisites. But if you're starting from scratch, like it could take probably like 4+ years. Yeah.
Why I'm belaboring this a little bit is I want people to understand, to be an appraiser and an AACI status, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of years, a lot of education. So when you're out there doing your job, you're not cavalier about this. You're doing a certain job. By the way, Jason, just so you know, when I went through all my courses, I think the instructor took pity on me because I had to take the first year CGA course, the introductory CGA. And to this day, I still don't have a clue what the debit and the credit is, but I got through it. I think he took mercy on me, because that was probably the hardest thing I ever did. Debits, credits, debit. It was horrible. Stats was my favorite stuff, but leaving it alone. By the way, I don't think people know this about a province of Ontario. People that are listening in right now, we've got 40 people on here. There's no licensing in the province of Ontario for an appraiser. Anybody can be an appraiser just by holding themselves out to be one. Doesn't mean they'll be recognized, but they can do it, can't they? There's no licensing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess anyone can have an opinion on anything, right? If you want to, right? So, yeah, I mean, but yeah, specific to Ontario, I don't think there's a regulating or governing body. I mean, the Appraisal Institute of Canada does have an Ontario chapter and an Ontario sort of like umbrella, but it's not really meant for licensing. It's just sort of maintaining and sort of the Ontario hub for AIC appraisers.
Now, what I'm going to do, just so people, just before we get right into what's going on now, what you're seeing, what your duties are, just so the realtors that are listening know, I have been back and forth over the years with the E&O insurance company that looks after all RICO. And the realtors don't understand that there is, we are covered to do appraisal work. We could do a divorce. We could do two partners that don't, just want to split up a house. We can do all that. We are not covered under E&O if we do an appraisal as a realtor for financing, be it for a bank, a line of credit, mortgage. We are not covered. The other thing is, it should not be the large part of our business. We could do supplementary, but it cannot be, we can't use our real estate license to do appraisal full time. They won't cover. So just so there's some caution here, okay? And last but not least, let's get right into this. So one of the things I walked away from in the 90s, we had, just so people know, Lebow Hicks, we did 5,000 houses a year for mortgage work in the residential division. I had 13 appraisers. One day after doing a complete cost analysis for 2 months, I realized the profit margin was so poor on what we were making that I closed the division. I let everybody go except 3 people, and we were dedicated after that. No more mortgage work. We refused all mortgage work. I didn't want to work with mortgage brokers, especially. They drove me crazy. And the profits and everything else. But we were predominantly litigation work, divorces, estates, valuation days, all this stuff. You, though, when you went on your own, you decided to go and work for lenders besides the normalized other stuff. And you're on a lot of lists for different mortgage lenders, correct?
Yeah, that is correct.
So just stop right there. The list. Let's just so the people listening understand. An appraiser cannot just go work for TD Bank, or somebody's going to the bank, TD Bank or Home Saving. You have to be on their approved list. Am I correct?
Yes, that is correct. I mean, some lenders are a little bit more strict about their list than others, for sure, but they all do have a list that you have to sort of, well, not sort of, you have to be on. Now, how you get on that list varies from lender to lender, but yeah, you're correct. There is a list for every lender. RBC and Scotia, I found, are very strict. And then, well, BMO as well, and then like so TD, CIBC, they all have their lists, in order to actually complete mortgage work for them, you do have to sort of be recognized by them on top of any credentials and experience that you have, for sure.
So when somebody here has a problem and they want a second appraisal, which their client may have to pay for, will pay for. Mm-hmm. Just because you are approved by RBC doesn't mean that you are approved automatically if they're going to CIBC or one of the other lenders. In other words, you could have done the appraisal for one, and then you can't do the appraisal. You can't be hired by somebody else, or you can't, how do I put it to you, assign the appraisal over from one lender to the other if the other lender doesn't have you on the list, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. I mean, and there's also some liability kind of things that an appraiser has to think about in that particular scenario as well. But in general terms, yes. If I prepare an appraisal for your client for TD, for example, and then they're not happy with the terms, or they're not, for whatever reason, they want to now take that appraisal and try to go to CIBC with the same appraisal, there's a good chance that CIBC will probably not accept it unless, again, the appraisal is prepared by someone on both lists. But then there's also the question of, is this like an arm's length appraisal kind of thing, right? Like the lenders generally would like to order the appraisal with, even if you're on the list, maybe they don't know your relationship with the client or whatever, so they sometimes would even want to order it independent of you, even if you're on the list, potentially.
Yeah. So the client of the agent here today may end up paying a couple of if they're shopping, they can turn around and say, I don't like the TD terms, go somewhere else, but they pay for another appraisal, so that could get very expensive.
It's funny that you say that. I just finished one this morning, submitted one that the client had an appraisal completed for CIBC. They didn't like this is for refinancing. They didn't like the value. So then they shopped with RBC, got another appraisal. And then I'm not sure what the terms are of that deal was, but then they ordered another appraisal with CIBC. And that was the one that I prepared. And so they ended up having to order 3 appraisals on this property so far. I'm not sure what's going on. I don't know the backstory, but I just know that's what I know.
But they paid an appraisal, they probably, and they saved what, 1/4%? They could have, anyways, it's not even saving money.
But my thing is like the relative cost of an appraisal compared to, let's say, the financing that, like if you're refinancing, for example, like it's a relatively small cost. So I think some people are like, yeah, I don't mind ordering a few appraisals if I can potentially get what I'm looking for, I guess, right? So
yeah. Now let's look at this. Let's look at the big one today. So oh, by the way, so people understand this, I just want to qualify this. This is really important. You're not a cottage guy. You're not a rural guy. You do the expanded GTA. You're an urban guy. I mean, you go to Newmarket, Aurora, a place like that, but you're not going out to do lakefront cottages and stuff like that.
I'm not going into the core. That's too much, or like Muskoka or cottage country like that.
So we know that, just so people understand. Now, you go out, and the house sold last night. And they call you in, the lender calls you, the people apply for financing. And Jason Lee, you go out and you see that the house was listed for $1.2 million. It sells for $1.4 million, $200,000 over. And you don't have one comp at $1 million. You don't even have comp at $1.3 million. The last sale was what they were pretty well asking for the house, was the asking price. You've got these $200,000, $300,000 jumps, as you will. Yeah. And you and I, this is how this all came about. You and I were discussing this about a couple of weeks ago. We were discussing exactly the situation. And of course, you were saying one of the great saving graces now is, with the rising market, is to get the appraisal done, longer closing, and the appraisal gets done just before closing. But right now, what do you do when you go back to the lender and go, I got nothing to justify? They just set a record.
Lenders are aware of that. Like when I speak to the lender, they like, and I sort of pose that question or bring up that scenario. They understand that potentially every sale could be setting a new benchmark or setting a new price level. And I think they do sort of try to incorporate that in their underwriting. But from an appraisal standpoint, like the best we can do is rely on whatever the most recent and best information is available. So I guess in that scenario, one of the things I would try to do is maybe have a conversation with the buying agent on the deal, if there is one, and sort of just get an understanding of how they got the price that they committed to, and what was the sort of rationale behind it. I mean, if it was a bidding situation and it was emotional and just got that's just their client was willing to, that's where the client was willing to go, then
stop right there. Stop you right there. I'm going to interject right, because you just hit a point.
Yeah.
Are you influenced by the fact that there were 11 offers on the property? Doesn't it tell you that 11 people tried to buy this property over asking price?
Well, I mean, like that, hopefully that's a symptom of what's going on in that particular neighborhood or area. Like, meaning like, if the area is really in demand, and every property that there's low supply, and every property that sort of gets listed in the recent history is showing that, there's multiple offers, that kind of a situation, then it does definitely speak to the story of what's going on. And it's part of the picture, and it lets me know that, this neighborhood, these houses, this pocket is very in demand. And usually if that is the case in every sale that you see, even if you're going back a few months and you look at the sales history, you'll see like a pattern, a trend developing, and that would be part of I'd incorporate that into the valuation for sure. Like,
do you ask how many offers there were?
Yeah, sometimes I will. And just, again, our job is to sort of part of it is recreating what happened and trying to understand if it sort of is in line with the market, in line with kind of what what you could typically project or anticipate would be happening based on, you know, the most recent information you're seeing. So part of it is asking those kinds of questions, trying to understand what happened, and then also it's projecting. It's not really projecting forward. We're not giving future values, but we're sort of trying to look at the trends and try to be like, I think a good appraiser is trying to really have a pulse on what it really is happening in on your particular subject property or your subject area, and really trying to provide an accurate opinion as to, you know, what the value would be or should be, right? Because a lot of times, yeah, like, I mean, with mortgage work, sometimes you already know, like, you know, the purchase price. So, you know, it's kind of working backwards in a way where you're.
Oh, you got MLS. You see the MLS.
Yeah. But truly an appraisal, like, you know, a lot of times, you know, you don't have anything, like you're forming your opinion based on no data on the specific to the subject, right? In terms of pricing and value and stuff like that, right? So I always try to look at it with that lens as well, right?
How many lenders do we think you're on the list of? Just guess, just a rough one. I don't expect an exact answer.
Well, I'm on the list for all the major lenders. So, you know, it's
20, 25, give or take? More?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah,
okay, so stop you right there. Everybody has a different criteria. Do you ever get pressured where they say, Jason, we want a conservative value no matter what. We want conservatism to rule. They don't care what happens. They just want conservatism. Do you ever get pressured from the lender that way? Or if I just put you in an uncomfortable position to ask?
No, I'm going to be completely honest, and I would say no. Like, they don't really. I mean, that seems to be the perception. I've been to properties and speaking with homeowners, and they're like, "Oh, you're doing a bank appraisal." Like, they're always pretty conservative, right? And that's a common comment that I get, but
misconception.
Yeah, I think. Well, I can't speak to all appraisers either. Maybe there are, you know, that is happening in the greater picture. But I really try to be fair, because I understand that, you know, it impacts everyone involved, right? So I try to, again, be unbiased and try to be as fair as possible with whatever conclusion I end up putting on paper, so to speak. But yeah, I mean, I've had smaller lenders, like B lenders, kind of try to pressure and put pressure to sort of have values maybe higher than they should be. I've had that kind of pressure before.
You work with mortgage brokers too?
It's not really the lender, it's more the brokers, right? But
the brokers were part of the reason I hated the business.
Yeah, they sometimes do that. But I think it's just, again, having relationship and sort of setting the tone from the beginning. Like, if I do any work for a new broker that I haven't worked with, I haven't completed appraisals for before, I do this in all cases, but I mean, I just really try to show them, you know, what I'm about and how I complete my work right from the get-go. So if they're going to use me again, they know what they're getting. And if they weren't happy because I was doing my job, I mean, I don't really want to work with brokers who, you know, are putting undue pressure, or, you know, I don't know. You know, I hope I'm conveying what
I know you're being political. I don't have to be.
Yeah.
I walked through, I used to think some of the brokers were so bad. I used to say they ripped off my arm and tried to beat me over the head with my own arm. There were certain brokers that I banned. I wouldn't do work for them because they were obnoxious. There were other brokers were very, if that's the value, that's the value. They were gentlemen and ladies. It was different, but brokers were not easy because they're getting paid to, you know, they're getting a commission to broker a deal. And sometimes they don't care as long as it goes through. So you've got to ratchet. Every time a new price comes out, it ratchets, it goes up. You've got another new price. Does that new price, the overbidding, become the benchmark now for houses? Let's take Willowdale. I'll just give a simple one. Bungalow in Willowdale, okay, $1.4 million. Now, the last sale was $1,250,000. All of a sudden, you're at $1.4 million. When that house sells for $1.4 million, is it an anomaly, or does that become the new benchmark when you go down the street to do an appraisal?
if I've done my due diligence and I can sort of determine that, you know, that sale was completed arm's length and meets the criteria as a market sale. I mean, it's definitely, I mean, I can't ignore it. Potentially, I can't ignore it as a comparable. So I would include it as a comparable, but that's why in appraisal, we don't rely on just one sale. We rely on, well, we go through probably in each appraisal I'll review at least, you know, like 10 to 20 sales that are relevant. And then what ends up being in the report is typically you want to be concise. So you're trying to narrow it down to about 3 to 4 sales at most in a residential appraisal. So that particular sale, that new benchmark or that new I guess data point I would include, but I would also have to sort of bracket the appraisal with 2 or 3 other sales that I think are very relevant and also comparable, and then I'd have to reconcile that information into a conclusion. But yeah, I mean that sale would be relevant if it's ratcheting up, as you say. The most recent and sale would definitely still be part of the the valuation for sure.
Yeah, somebody has asked, does it have to be a sold deal? No, the minute it's registered on MLS, that becomes a comparable. It doesn't have to sell. In the United States, a lot of the estates, they can only use sales that actually closed. The trouble with closing versus today is an action in time. It's current. When it closes, it could be 2 to 3 months in the future, and that's a different market. So that's why closed sales in commercial, it's a little bit of a different story.
There's a lag effect. If it's closed, then yeah, like it might not reflect the price level today. But from a risk management standpoint, I do think that is probably a more, as you say, conservative or a safer approach. I mean, there is some merit to that. Like right now, like, a lot of times on MLS, you'll see a property that says sold, but it hasn't closed. And then there's sometimes a scenario where it doesn't close, right?
That's what's happening a lot right now.
Yeah, but then that was relied on, and several sales subsequent to that depended on that sale, so to speak. And then that's where I think you can sort of create some instability, right? So yeah.
Just for your own, last week, in one day, speaking to 3 different lawyers, they all told me about people walking away, not closing. Some of them woke up the next morning and went, "Oh my goodness, what did I do?" in a moment of emotion. Mm-hmm. And others, of course, the argument was, well, they went to their lender the next morning and was told, "You're out of your mind, you've overpaid, and we're not going to be able to finance it." So there's going to be a fair amount of litigation coming up in the next few years. And I know that there's people on this call right now listening to us who are worried if some of their deals are going to firm up, or if they're actually going to close, So we have to watch for that. So closing makes sense. So what happens is bracketing. By the way, I only believe in bracketing. I mean, that old stuff of, anybody here that took the old, most of them took the appraisal course through the Ontario Real Estate Association from Maria's course way back, those that took it, and they were taught, you do this adjustment and that adjustment and 5% here and 2% here. I threw all that out the window years ago. At these prices, bracketing is the only thing that makes sense to me. Do you agree or disagree?
I definitely agree that bracketing makes a lot of sense. I do still think there is place for adjustments, but it's kind of a combination of the two, in my opinion.
But adjustments are better, but you can only do that in standardized houses. Let's look at what's changed your business. It would be about the 70s or the 80s when the first renovations started en masse. Today, you go, especially in downtown, in the core, there's not one house that's the same as the one next door. Some could be original and some could be done like out of magazines. I mean, there's no the comps, the adjustments are so difficult. Open concept, non-open, modern, post, it's like comparing works of art.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely getting more and more tailored and custom and specific to each building and property. But I think what I like to do, or what I try to do, is be detailed in my observations and descriptions of the property and improvements, and really try to get if it's a property like that, really try to get a sense of what I'm seeing and sort of the feel, if you will, when you're there. But then at the same time, I think there are once you're doing the adjustments, sometimes it's better to not necessarily be so fine-toothed with the adjustments. It's very specific thing. Or I think there's things that stick out when you're doing adjustments, regardless of how unique or custom a property is. Size of a home, that is definitely a big one that typically you would adjust for. As nice of a home as it is, if it's 2,500 square foot home versus a 3,500 square foot home, there's still a difference there, right?
Of course.
Yeah. So I mean, that would be an example.
And the lot size.
And then the lot size and frontage.
Yeah. And the age of the house too. I mean,
yeah, age
is very important. There's a difference when you're appraising a 1980 and a year 2000 built. They're different houses.
Right.
But let me throw this to you. You're not working alone. You've got some people working for you, and you got freelance people. And are you guys hitting the numbers right now? You're not hitting the numbers in every case, are you?
When you say hitting the numbers, you mean?
In other words, what property they're looking for financing? They bought the house or the condo at X dollars. Yep. Are you hitting it at 100% of what they paid? And I mean, are you getting a lot of people coming back on you and saying, "Come on, Jason, give it another look. Come on, we need a few more bucks here. We're just a little shy, or can you come up a little bit?" I mean, are you getting pressured?
I would say, I was having this conversation with you yesterday a little bit too, but I think the market right now, as of March, literally very recency biased, my view of it right now is, I think it's sort of becoming more of a, to be honest, a little bit more of a balanced market is what I'm seeing right now. But to answer your question, I definitely have cases where I'm not coming to value in the sense that my conclusion is not meeting what the purchase price appears to indicate. But then that's not in most cases. I find usually if the buyer and hopefully the buyer's agent and everyone have sort of done their due diligence and sort of went in with a game plan in terms of a property that they're really interested in. Usually, the negotiated price typically it can be supported, but yeah, there are those outliers. I don't know if I would call them outliers. Yeah, I would say they're outliers where yeah.
Okay, it's a scenario.
Yeah.
The last sale you've got you got a condo. The last sale of a one bedroom was under 500,000. There hasn't been any, and there's abundance. I mean, over the years, you can see they've gone from 450 to 490 in that range. All of a sudden, you got a sale at 530. You can't hit 530. You look and you go, I got 3 sales here. Nothing's over 500. So you report back to lender. Now, do you hear back when you come in with your appraisal and you submit it? Do you ever get a phone call back on that? Or is that just the way it lies? You don't know what went on. You just go on to your next job.
Yeah, again, for the most part, no, I don't get phone calls on, I don't get the lender or the underwriter or the bank, the financial service, the person ordering the appraisal at the branch level or whoever. Usually they don't call back to say to appeal the appraisal. I mean, but then, every so often there might be an appeal, and they'll bring whatever other comparables that they think I should have considered in the appraisal, and I'll review those. And if it's warranted, I mean, sure, if there's a revision that should be made, I will definitely revise my report. But typically that doesn't happen, because usually if I miss something, that means I missed something, which is you don't want to be missing things if you're providing values. But I mean that does happen on very rare occasions, I would say. But Again, going back to answer your question, I think what you're asking is like, do lenders sort of, when you don't meet value, do they come back at appraisers and sort of ask them what happened or why are we not meeting value? I would like to say they understand the process, and they sort of do give appraisers. I mean, again, I think it takes over time. Like for me, like I've built kind of a reputation and standing with my lenders, and I've been tested many times. They've thrown all kinds of weird properties at me, and I've been able to sort of navigate through them and provide them with the reports I think that they can rely on. So I think over time, I've built sort of that kind of standing with them. And so when I provide an appraisal, even if it's undervalued, so to speak, most times they don't come back at me, So I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah.
Okay, let me just do this. Let's just look at this, and I'm going to open up in a few minutes to do some questions. Okay. House sells last night.
Yep.
It's closing. What are we in now? We're in almost the end of March. It's closing 30th of April, just for argument's sake. It's a quick, reasonable closing, 5 weeks. When are you called in to do the appraisal? Today or closer to the closing date?
It's all across the board. I think some lenders, like it really comes down to even the representative at the lender, I think, right? Like some like to work, sort of get ahead of their files, and they order the appraisal pretty quickly after the agreement is signed by both parties. But then and then obviously I get scenarios a lot where this deal is closing in 2 days. We need an appraisal. That happens every day. Like, I mean, even after this call, I'm going to probably have to deal with like three files today where they're like, oh, we got to rush. It's closing on Thursday or even tomorrow. Can you get this appraisal done? I get that call every day.
Okay, so that one, the one that's the last minute, that's before the closing. So therefore, that property could have sold in December or January, and now they're coming in. So they're in a better position because prices have gone up.
And if I had to guess, sometimes I get appraisals where once I start doing the due diligence on the property and I see that, it was sold back in, let's say, December. But then way back then, if I'm looking at the data back then,
way back when,
it was definitely the high water mark. Like it was definitely, if I had to try to complete that appraisal back in December, I would have probably had a hard time supporting that sale. But since then, there have been new sales to further, I guess, support the new price levels that you're seeing, and then if I appraise that today, it's that purchase is now supported, kind of thing. That does happen, and I would imagine too, like I might not even be the first appraisal. Like maybe they had one ordered back in January, and then they're like, okay, you know what? Let's try ordering the appraisal again in February or March or something like that. Like that, I can't say for certain, but I'm thinking that might be happening too sometimes. Yeah.
By the way, just a couple of fast questions were asked during chat, just to get them cleared out of the way. Somebody asked about are you independent or do you work for people? And there's two types of appraisers. There are in-house appraisers that work for corporations.
Right.
And then there's, like you, freelance appraisers. You work for your own corporation. You're self-employed. Yeah.
So the term that specifically the Appraisal Institute of Canada deems it is you're either a fee appraiser or a non-fee appraiser. So so I am a fee appraiser. So as Barry mentioned, like I have my own business, and I'm sort of a freelance appraiser. Like I'm out there for hire, so to speak. And then there are other designated appraisers who will work for institutions, corporations, whoever, in-house appraisers. Yeah.
Here you are, Jason. Make a note, folks. Take your cameras out, take a picture, because I'll leave it up for a few minutes. Another thing is, just so somebody knows, I mean, this is part of my lectures to agents when I'm doing my seminars. Just so you know, every time an agent opens his mouth or her mouth and says a value of a property, it is not an opinion. It's a valuation. It's an appraisal. The courts have ruled that you are professionals. You do not give letters of opinion. You're giving a valuation. Every time you give a value, you have given an appraisal. because there's no real definition of an appraisal in the Bank Act in Canada. It's very vague. And therefore, the Appraisal Institute years ago, probably 15 years ago, said there is no such thing as a letter of opinion. And that is a rule of the land. There really isn't such a thing as a letter of opinion. It's evaluation. You're doing an appraisal. The minute you even verbally or put it on paper, you've done an appraisal. So please don't stop using the word opinion. It doesn't exist. How do you get on an approved list? Isn't that a good one? Are you a good golfer?
Yeah, so I think that's sort of unique to everyone's circumstance and situation. Like for me, it was more just a lot of knocking on doors, so to speak, and I think having the AACI was a big benefit, to be honest, because I do a lot like all my work's residential essentially, but well, mostly, but as an AACI, like it's typically, the perception is it's regarded as more of a commercial designation as well, because you can do commercial and residential. So when I came into the residential space as an AACI, I think initially what got my foot in the door and a lot of the lenders was like, oh, this is, this company is this appraiser is an AACI, so they maybe even gave me like
a boost.
Sort of, yeah, it gave me a boost, I think, in their perception, right? And I'm well trained, like Barry and Lois, definitely, gave me fantastic experience, and really, I learned so much and earned
I took you to a strip club when we started. Do you remember? We had to go appraise at a strip club.
Yeah, so
I had three strip clubs from one company, and I thought somebody has to do it. In the meantime, we didn't even have to deal with the club itself, because the only value, the land was the development site.
Yeah, and that happens a lot.
I think it was like they put a 40-story building on that site eventually. But I remember one of the first things I ever did with you, I took you, a nice Christian boy, to a strip club. I think that was interesting.
Well, it wasn't, it was during off hours, so it was just a building at that time, but it was interesting. Yeah.
I'll tell you another story about that. Nothing to do with the girls, about the developer. It was quite a very interesting story another time. Somebody asked about if you belong to more than TREB.
Do I belong to
any other boards?
Other boards or TREB? Yeah.
You
so
stay within TREB, don't you?
So not as an appraiser, I'm not a member of TREB, but again, I want to be thorough. I actually, technically, I do have my realtor license, and I am a member of TREB, but I use it primarily just so that I have like full access to MLS data. I can do like historical searches and go back further than like 3 years and all that kind of stuff. Because like appraisers, if they have appraiser access to MLS, I believe they only have access to like 1 year of historical data.
No, we go way back.
Really?
We went to the 80s. TREB's got to the 80s.
No, I mean, there's a separate access for appraisers.
Oh, for appraisers, I apologize.
That have access to MLS. Yeah. They don't get the full range of data. So for me, that was a big negative. And so I took the time to get my realtor license as well and have full access. Yeah.
I know we couldn't have done. And for the people know, before I'm just going to turn it over in 2 seconds to open it up for questions. What I found is a lot of times with divorces and people that acquired a lot of property in their lifetimes, husbands and wives or partners, we had to go back into the 60s and other areas where we couldn't even get in through the computer. We had to go sit down with the old books and all this stuff and find values back in the day to start. You have to do 1971, which is the capital gain V-Day. And but there were times where we had to go back into the 60s. And,
I did a few of those with Lois and yourself as well. I had to go.
It's a big part of our business at one time. So what I'm going to do is anybody that wants to ask a question, unmute yourself. And I've just turned that on. You have the ability to ask a question. Just hit unmute and go ahead. And has anybody got questions for Jason or the appraisal process? Anybody want to ask a question here? If you can't or ask
Hello,
you?
everybody. Actually, I would like to ask Jason a question. Good morning, Barry.
Good morning.
Jason, how do you go about the rapid increase and change of the prices, like 15 to 20% from one month to another month for the appraisal that you do intend to do, or the outcomes, how do they work exactly for the bank?
Yeah, so I kind of witnessed this happening back in 2017. I'm sure a lot of you were aware of that as well. Like in the 2016 to 2017 market, at least in the GTA for sure. From let's say October 2016 all the way to like maybe April, May 2017, prices were increasing very rapidly, like 5% a month, or in some neighborhood, you just every new sale wasn't like an incremental increase. It was a substantial increase, and that made it very challenging from an appraisal standpoint and from a lending perspective. But again, my job isn't to. The challenge is my job isn't to necessarily just meet values or anything like that. My job is to support evaluation based on like not just one data point, but sort of as many data points that are relevant as possible, and then reconcile and put it together. So in that kind of an environment, I'm going to be honest, it is tough to meet values. It is tough to sort of support, if you're finding your clients are, your client purchased a property or you sold a property, and you're doing obviously your job if you're a selling agent and you want to get the max top dollar for your clients. And I totally understand that. But at the same time, it does make it challenging if the buyer then requires financing to support the full value if you were able to sell your property for 10-15% above what the most recent sale in that neighborhood is showing. The reality is if buyer does end up needing financing, that is a pretty tough scenario for someone like myself to support, unless there's comparable sales, maybe not necessarily specifically in the next in a 1 kilometer radius, but let's say in a 3 kilometer radius, or you're in a neighborhood like just for Toronto as an example, you're in Lawrence Park, but then there's like a sale in like maybe Forest Hill that even though they're different neighborhoods, you can argue that depending on the property that you can still make a comparison, and there's some kind of way I can sort of show that relationship or correlation, and then maybe I can support it, right? But the reality is sometimes that's a tough scenario. There are definitely been instances where the appraisal value or the lending, what the lender is willing to finance is less than there is a gap, and then I do sometimes ask, like, what happens in that scenario? And a lot of times the buyer will have to put additional funds towards the property to make that deal work and close. That does happen. I would say, I'm not trying to self-promote here necessarily, but if you're on the selling side, or even on the buying, well, maybe not the buying, but if you're on the selling side and you're trying to represent your clients, but you honestly can't say for certain what you think this property is worth, and you're going to do an offer situation and let the market dictate what it's worth. But I mean, in that scenario, if you're not entirely sure, maybe in advance of the offer date, getting an appraisal done is not a bad idea. So at least you have an idea, or give your client an idea of from a lending or a bank perspective, maybe what the value would be, and it just gives you more information to work with, right? So that might be something you would consider. Yeah.
Next question. Who's next? Question. We're going to take a few questions, and anybody, you just unmute yourself. Anybody? I thought somebody else was trying to get in.
Hi, it's Tracy.
Hi, Tracy.
Hi, Barry.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thank you, my dear.
So Jason, I had a property a couple months ago that appraised lower, and we were the winning bid of 22 offers. So it is what it is. Anyways, so it's not closing till May, so we said let's wait a bit and get. In the meantime, within 10 days, 2 other houses on the same street sold for the same price as ours or a bit more. So before that, you couldn't support the price, and I get that. but now you can support the price. So would it be beneficial for us to wait that much longer and get another appraisal, because now those ones are coming in higher based on my sale?
Yeah, I mean, you got to sort of determine for your, your client, whether, waiting, like if you're projecting that the market is going to continue going up, and I mean, assuming that is true, then yeah, like I guess waiting for the appraisal would be beneficial in that scenario, right? Like, because then there'll be new sales. Yeah,
100%.
for sure, Tracy.
Somebody asked, oh, Jason, here's a great question somebody just asked in chat. Let's not go out of the ordinary. It's a subdivision house. Doesn't matter if it's 20-year-old subdivision or newer, it doesn't matter. Cookie cutter house, as we call them. What's the basic fee for an appraisal, residential mortgage appraisal?
It varies by market, so I don't want, because I know there's some people that out of Ontario in this, like, but it varies. I really think it does vary, but I think, your starting rate for an appraisal, you're probably looking at around $300,
And then now you go to Forest Hill. What are you charging for the house?
It varies on the use and type, but I mean, I've charged, I mean, like, it depends again if it's for litigation or matrimonial, but
well, not litigation,
even for financing, I've had scenarios where truly, unique custom home, like 15,000 square feet in Forest Hill, something like that, like, 1,500, 2,000.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, but that's not, and this, so they know that's not a form report. You're already into what they call a narrative.
No, even those though, sometimes I will prepare those on a form, but there will be like probably 4 to 5 comparables. Like it's more, there is a narrative, like there's an addendum with more of a,
there's more substance.
Well, I would say appraisals in general, they've changed over the years, Barry, for sure. There's more substance to them now than there were before because of the market. The market has dictated that that's necessary, right? Like you can't just do a simple thing anymore. Like, I mean, even on the residential side, right? In Toronto, like values of properties are, $1 million is nothing, right? Meaning what I mean by that, I mean, it's like, the standards for everything have gone up now, and the costs and everything, right? So it really, like the due diligence and what is required now.
If somebody doesn't like an appraiser doesn't do their job well.
Right.
If an agent doesn't do their job well, they go to RICO. Can someone complain about an appraiser to the Appraisal Institute of Canada? And will they deal with that? It's not about value. They can't argue the value, right? It's if the value was done poorly. Am I correct?
You're definitely correct. Absolutely. Like that's why the Appraisal Institute Canada is there. It's a regulatory body. It is there to also govern and handle formal complaints. If the appraiser is not meeting the standards of what they're supposed to, in terms of whether it's their professionalism or their conduct or the actual content of an appraisal report. Was it prepared according? So appraisers have to conform to a document called the Canadian Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, which is a governing or regulatory document. You can look it up. It's available online.
Excuse me. That is set by the Congress of the United States. There's an act of Congress.
Yeah, because the
Canadians adhere to it.
Yeah, like the Canadian version definitely piggybacks, or I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't say that because I'm not part of the formulation of it, but there's a lot of parallels to the American version, which is called the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal.
That's right. And we adapted it because I still have my American designation. I never gave it up.
Okay, but yeah, so that's sort of what's supposed to sort of standardize and formalize and keep appraisals prepared in a uniform sort of, there's a minimum requirement. And if we're not meeting those standards in any such way, then the Appraisal Institute of Canada can look at your specific situation and they have a body that reviews and provides rulings, and we have insurance coverage of up to $2 million for these kinds of reasons. And I'm not going to say that all the appraisers out there are great, and no one is. Like I do review appraisals fairly frequently, where usually in more litigious matters where they're like, this appraiser prepared this. Can you provide a review opinion? And then when I look at the appraisal report, I'm just like, yeah, you know, like I literally go through QSPAP and I start pointing out all the things that they missed or that are not compliant. Again, this isn't for the Appraisal in Canada, right? It's for the lawyer dealing with the case, but it gives them, you know, their ammunition.
I get that with my litigation because I see a lot. I still do a lot of review because of the simple fact that it ties in with the litigation that I'm involved in, where agents are being sued. The appraisal is part of the process in many cases. And what I find an objectionable thing is they send some kid, and I'm sorry, I'm not belittling someone. They send some kid from up in Brampton down into Cabbagetown in Toronto to do the appraisal. When there was a valid, I mean, it's a skill set just to be able to do Riverdale or Cabbagetown. And they send some suburban appraiser in, doesn't know what they're doing. Comparables are like not even close by, don't even have an understanding. I see that so much. The companies just send the wrong appraiser.
Yeah, I mean, the appraisal industry, it's set up where in some ways where the fee structure and the expectation of lenders in a lot of cases are they try to squeeze us for the lowest fees possible. And I think what some appraisal firms do as a model is they just, you know, when you constantly, I think the quality of people that you can potentially get for what you're able to sort of pay and make feasible for a business model. Like Barry, you kind of mentioned it earlier when you said you had a firm, your appraisal on the mortgage side, you know, when you're operating, you had 13 appraisers, and then you did the analysis and you realized you're not actually making any profit. You're just spinning the wheels. Like,
yeah. Cash flow was good though.
Cash flow, but I mean, yeah, but then your expenses are so high and like whatever, right? So like, I think that scenario might be I think that probably does happen in a lot of cases. For me, like, you know, I was working from home prior to all the COVID and the trend, it becoming trendy. And that allowed me to sort of save on definitely some operating costs. So and then, you know, I take my time when I hire people. Like I have a team of 4 appraisers right now, but they're all like, I took my time training them, but I know that there's firms out there that have, you know, 20, 25 appraisers. And I'm assuming that, yeah, some of the review process and you know, the training and stuff, it's probably slipping through the cracks. Like I don't want to paint the picture that there's, you know, that's one aspect, but there's definitely other firms.
I see it from another point of view. I'm involved with a MIC, which is a mortgage investment corporation, and I'm an advisor to them, and I have to review appraisals at times. And one of those schlock appraisal firms was $1 million out on a house, $1 million out. And I said, number one, I don't understand why these people are in business. They've been in business forever. And 2, I told my people, don't ever let these people, as much as there is a list where you're approved, there's another list that says, don't ever use these people.
Yeah, actually, sometimes I get orders where it says, in like, there's this thing called special instructions, and it says, do not use so-and-so company, like, please do not use that company. Like,
that's correct.
It's sometimes the ordering process is automated, so they get auto-assigned, but then like, if there's a special instruction, then I think somewhere in the queue or the system, it allows someone in the process to know, don't assign it to so-and-so. Right? So
I think we've covered an awful lot. Jason, I really want to thank you one more time, folks. I'm going to do this one more time and let you, there's Jason's information. I've got another, just so you know, before we break here, and I thank Jason so much because I know he's going crazy. He's got reports all over his desk. Couple of things coming up. Brian Madigan and I am obsessed with the fact that embedded in a real estate offer is the title insurance clause, which I would never allow my buyers to use. So I reached out to my friend Brian Madigan. Brian and I speak twice a week, every week. And Brian and I are going to do about a 15-minute thing on why this is a bad clause for a buyer. And we'll be talking about that. Also, I'm just looking at my calendar. I'm going to be Brian and myself and Sandra, and okay, Brian and myself are going to review real estate litigation cases where agents were sued. I've got 3 cases that I was involved in Brian's going to do 3, he's got, and the moderator is going to be Sandra Jackson. And we're doing that for the Buzz Conference on the 25th, which is next week. And we've really been working at this and we're really excited. So there's all kinds of stuff coming up. And I'm going to be having a lot more guests and a lot more stuff happening in April and May and what have you. And it's all free, folks. It's just, you know what? You get to my age, you turn around. A lot of people were damn good to me on the way up. And this is how I repay my mentors. I give away as much as I can because these people were phenomenally generous to me. So Jason Lee, thank you so very, very much.
My pleasure,
Always
Barry.
a pleasure. It's too bad that the next time we'll see each other probably will still be masks on, but we can't break bread together. But I don't eat bread anymore, but that's okay. And I look forward to seeing it. I hope some people here look and see, hey, Jason Lee, you got some new business here. So I hope you get some benefit out of this today.
Thanks everyone for having me. It was my pleasure. And yeah, anytime you have questions or anything, I'm always here. Thank you.
And remember, next week, folks, me, Brian Madigan, moderated by the fiery Sandra Jackson. Take care. Looking forward to seeing everybody soon. And be safe. Go slay your dragons, folks. Bye-bye.
Yeah,
Thanks,
bye-bye.
Barry. Thanks, Jason. That was awesome.
Thank you.